I was like, I'm ready, I'm built for this, let's go. And then I actually stepped into the role and had the reality of it.
Fiona McKenzie is the CEO of Revere, a B2B marketing agency with clients like Lenovo, Microsoft, Samsung, and WallPay.
Good leaders don't set up the business to be successful in the time that they're leading them. They make decisions that will set up the business to be successful long after they've gone for the long term.
Over the last 12 years, she's moved from account director to CEO, won more industry awards than anyone else in the room. That growth has led to a successful sale to Marketbridge, where Fee is now the managing director of Europe.
You do sometimes have to make those decisions that you know won't be popular, but ultimately it is about having the respect of your team. They might not always like the decisions you're making, but you know, you have to be able to make sure that you're being fair. There's a lot of people feeling the pressure to layer AI into their organisation, and they're kind of going about it the wrong way. What's our vision? What's our mission? What's our goals for the year? Our strategic priorities? What is holding us back on getting there? With the kid, I'm quite open with them if they're like, why are you doing a call late, mummy? Like, I haven't seen you all day, which is just like, oh, you know, they're pulling at the heartstrings.
There was a version of you that navigated all the way through your career and then stepped into the CEO role of Revere. There's a version of you that built Revere out and now sold it, and you're stepping into Marketbridge. Are they the same person, or does something have to shift for you as you go into this next chapter? I'm your host, Shopper Belusi, and today I have the absolute pleasure of speaking to Fiona McKenzie. How are you doing?
I'm great, and I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me on.
It is an absolute pleasure. And a place I would love to start is, if I was to go back to a younger you, if I met an 8-year-old version of Fee, before the ambition, the awards, careers, all of that, what kind of child would I be talking to?
Oh, I think when I answer this, a lot of people that know me will not be surprised, so I'm going to answer it honestly. I was definitely the kind of bossy child. You know, that was the kind of thing that I remember at primary school would kind of come up. Actually, it's really interesting. I always remember my mum kind of telling me, reflecting on it, that there was a really great teacher that reframed what was quite a negative in terms of bossy, and she said that there was a teacher that kind of said, you know, Fiona's got really great leadership capabilities, like your job as a parent is to help her understand what like positive and inclusive leadership looks like. So that's kind of the thing that comes to mind and is like stuck out, and it's quite interesting because now have 2 of my own children and 2 stepchildren and navigating parenting as a stepmom and a mum is definitely the hardest job, but I try and like bring those conversations in when I kind of see the skill sets and the kind of behaviors and strengths that they have, is just kind of like help model, you know, help show failure, but help direct the conversation and maybe turn what they might see as like a negative in their behavior into a positive. So that's definitely what jumps to mind. But I was really sporty, actually. Like, I'm less sporty now because I find I have less time to do that when you're kind of juggling a job and, you know, a family. I don't understand these people that I see that are running marathons. I'm like, when do they possibly, I am not that person. When do they have time to do that? But yeah, I mean, I was always kind of really organized, really like always sticking my oar into things, like always on organizing committees, house captains, things like that. I just kind of like love to get involved in community, and I guess I've always kind of naturally, without knowing it, like I have been a natural leader, and it's only really in the last kind of 5 years I've maybe reflected and recognized a lot of that, like when you talk about looking back to your childhood days.
When you had that reframe from that teacher, did it make a difference to you and how you showed up in school going forward, or did you just carry on and be yourself? And at that point in time, it didn't make much sense because you're still that young.
Yeah, I mean, at that time, it wasn't really direct to me. It was more like indirect to my parents. Kind of, like your primary school kind of parents' evening conversations. I think, like, as I was nearing the end of that, before I was going into like sort of the senior school. But I think definitely, like, teachers definitely do have quite a big impact on you when you're going through that journey in education. And there were definitely some teachers that like saw the skills that I had and the potentials. I wasn't massively academic. I had to work really hard to get good grades. It didn't come naturally to me, so I tend to, as you'd expect, kind of the industry I've landed in, I kind of was quite creative. I liked, I did do kind of quite vocational like choices that I made in my academic study. But it's funny, I feel like sometimes your path like leads you the same way, because I always remember when I was sort of doing my A-levels, I wanted to do marketing. I was like really interested in it, but I was too scared to take that jump to do it for a degree. And my parents were incredible. Like, they never pushed me in a direction, questioned the choices. They just let me follow my path. Wow. And they always supported me. They never kind of said, do you really think that's the right A-levels to pick? Or do you really think that's the right university you should go to? They've just championed me all the way. And I think that's kind of, that security is help just let me find the path. And I'm trying to bring that to the conversations that I have with my own children, but also when I talk to colleagues and things, is that if we all focus on things we're good at, if we follow our heart, like sometimes I do just genuinely believe we'll end up in the right places.
Speaking about your journey and obviously following your heart and where you kind of end up, I'm curious, when I think about the 12 years you've been at your company, going from account director all the way to CEO. When you took over 4 years ago, what were your thoughts when you were having that initial conversation? Was there ever any fear, any hesitation, or was it very much like, I'm ready, I'm built for this, like let's go?
Oh yeah, like I was like, I'm ready, I'm built for this, let's go. And then I actually stepped into the role and had the reality of it, because I think like that was my first big lesson, that it's very easy when you're sitting, even if you're in the leadership team and you're part of shaping some of the decisions and the conversations, it's very different to when you are sitting in that true leadership CEO position. Your mindset is different. You realize you are kind of, like the saying is lonely at the top. Like, you really do have to kind of, you look at things with a different lens, and you kind of realize the weight of responsibility that you take on. So I think I probably, like most things I do, I probably went into it a bit naive. I chased the next step. I chased what I wanted. I could see things that I felt I could bring value to in that role. And then I kind of have to learn on the job and figure out how to do it. But, that's definitely my first lesson was, I've probably taken on more than I anticipated. But, that's part of the learning journey, isn't it?
Were there any, I guess, frameworks or approaches that you had along your journey that have been very helpful for you to tailor your decision-making process?
I think if I think about like things that I refer back to when I think about like frameworks, Good to Great, the book, I forget the author, it's like slipped my mind, but I've read that a couple of times. That is definitely kind of a go-to, in that it definitely kind of sets a really clear strategy around building a culture, or a vision, a culture, the steps you need to take that take businesses from just being good and average to great businesses that survive. And one of the key messages I always took away from that was that, good leaders don't set up the business to be successful in the time that they're leading them. They make decisions that will set up the business to be successful long after they've gone, for the long term. And there's some really great case studies in there. So I've probably read that like 3 times in the last 5 years to like, take myself out of the day-to-day, take a step back and reset, and take some of the key lessons from that book that I've really enjoyed.
That's a very different approach to a lot of CEOs that I work with and have conversations with, because a lot of times they need to take a step back and take a step outside of business to move themselves forward. But they always say the same thing: I'm too busy, and there's so much stuff happening. I'm struggling to find the time to do so. So how did you, I guess, build that intentional muscle to do that over and over again to then help you to actually achieve the success that you had?
It's a pretty easy answer for me. So I was very aware when I stepped into the CEO role that I hadn't done that role before. And as part of that, someone in my network recommended Vistage, which is a CEO network, kind of as part of that kind of program that you join, you kind of have a peer group, you're kind of on a training program, and you basically meet one day a month. So when that was my commitment, that I would take one day a month to step out of the business, to enhance my leadership skill set, to sharp up on the kind of things that I needed to know and understand to lead a business successfully. And the great thing about the Vistage group that I was in was a complete diverse set of leaders, but no one is in your industry. And when I joined, I was like, oh, is this like, how are they going to help me? Because they don't understand marketing, like they don't understand the world that I'm in, you know. But actually it's like a massive strength, because the leaders that I work with are across multiple different sectors, different size organizations, some privately owned, some like are working within enterprises, like large organizations, global, UK based. And that has given me incredible insights and perspective over the last 4 years. Firstly, it's validated what I've been doing well. You know, some of the challenges that others faced, I've realized actually that isn't, that doesn't keep me awake at night in my business. So that kind of perspective has been really valuable. And alongside that, it's basically like having your own board. I mean, you know, you meet up with this group and it's basically like you're wrapped in cotton wool, because you can bring them those things that you perhaps can't even talk to your leadership team about, or, you know, anyone else, and they can help provide you and process the issues you face and help you make decisions effectively. And quite frankly, sometimes they tell you the things that you need to hear that you maybe don't want to, because it's not the easiest decision to make. So for me, again, like for anyone stepping into the role, I think, you know, joining a peer network and almost committing some time each month is really valuable.
I love that. And that intentionality piece of having that, I guess, commitment and accountability, again, is very priceless, because, like, well, if you say we're going to do something and I come back and you meet them again, you haven't done it. Like,
exactly. They write it down. They write it down. There's an action book. Like, they will hold you to account. And as you can well imagine, you know, they have all of those kind of values and, you know, things that they instill in the groups that make sure we're all successful.
I love that. Typically speaking, when I think about going from an operator to a leader, especially in your role with client services, you are a lot of times kind of rewarded for responsiveness and control. And I'm curious, like, which habits made you excellent with what you were doing previously, that when you became a CEO became liabilities and you had to kind of unlearn and let go of?
Oh, I mean, I guess the thing to say was I just love customer experience. Like, giving a great customer experience was always what I thrived on. So whether that, like, to your point, was response time, or, you know, when you'd present a campaign pitch that the client loved, or winning a new client, you know, just anything to do with client experience was kind of what got me out of bed in the morning. And then when I kind of stepped into the leadership role, obviously then my remit becomes wider, because I know that to create a great client experience, you need to have a great culture. To be able to continue all of that momentum and that great things for your customers, you need to have the right framework. From a behaviours perspective, I was extremely hands-on. You know, I was leading a team, probably about 30 at the time, and the person who stepped into my role I'd been working with for a number of years, and it was really tricky. And, you know, I'm sure she'd give you a different answer to this, but it's really tricky to step back and kind of let people do things their own way. But that was definitely probably one of my biggest learnings within the first year, was I don't need to be involved in everything. My role as a CEO is to create a framework of success for my leadership team, to create a vision and allow them the autonomy to run and work day to day. And I guess if you look at like measures of success, like based on what you said earlier, most CEOs talk about they can't take a step back because they're in the weeds, they're in the day to day. I think, you know, my success is always, can I go on holiday for a week without writing a handover to anyone? And if the answer is yes, then I'm doing my job successfully.
You're very like known as being people centric, and you just refer to it now. To it to go away means you can trust your people to kind of get on with it. Have there been instances, even like all the way throughout your career, where you realize that you were saying the right things about culture, about people, but not necessarily kind of living them out, or someone even called you out on it, and you realize, oh, I need to make a change here, model something different?
Yeah, I think you have to really lead authentically, and that's really hard to do when you've not been in a leadership role, because you're so mindful of all of the communications that you do, and you want to be liked, right? Like, you want to be liked and respected. But I think probably like over the last couple of years, I've really sort of started to really feel confidence in my leadership style. And, you know, you do sometimes have to make those decisions that you know won't be popular, but ultimately it is about having the respect of your team. They might not always like the decisions you're making, but, you know, you have to be able to make sure that you're being fair. I think my biggest learning around the culture piece and authenticity is it can't really come from the top. Like, you do have to lead authentically, and when you do that, that modeling will kind of cascade down throughout your organization. But culture isn't kind of bred from the leader, like it's one part of it. It's about creating this kind of framework that will allow your people to create the culture. And it, you know, you don't create culture by delivering big pitches, big all hands meetings that are nicely scripted and reversed. You create culture and you support culture as a leader through the little interactions you have in the office day to day, through those messages that you create, through that handwritten note, through those recognition posts. And it all kind of has to be connected, you know, and that's where like authenticity comes in. You just have to kind of be you. And I think we question ourselves so much as a leader, but I think over the last couple of years in particular, I've really just learned to accept who I am, and I'm okay with my weaknesses. Like, I've definitely got some, but you just kind of have to accept that they are what they are.
Was there something that helped you get more comfortable with accepting who you are and not being so overly critical of any flaws, weaknesses, mistakes and stuff that you kind of made over in your journey?
Yeah, I mean, like, the honest answer to that, since I know the kind of the nature of the unfiltered discussions you like to have on this, is, you know, I went through quite a tough divorce, you know, and I did a lot of therapy to support me on that, a lot of cognitive behavioural therapy, which allowed me to be really reflective around myself, my personality, my values, what I believe in, and all of that work that I did to kind of make myself well mentally in my personal life, just completely translated into my professional life. And there's so many learnings from the strategies that I did then and the work that I did then over a period of time that I still use today professionally. So I think that's what comes to mind without a doubt.
Wow, it's powerful. I'm curious, do you see vulnerability as a strength or as a weakness? Because you strike me as someone who's very open to sharing and empowering your people through your journey. Like, listen, this is me. I'm not perfect. I'm trying to figure things out. And you're not necessarily hiding things, as opposed to some people who'd be like, nope, as a leader, as a CEO, I cannot show these things. I kind of need to pull that wall up. Where do you kind of stand on all of that?
Oh, I'm completely vulnerable when I need to be. I think, like, sometimes you need to recognize the moment where you need to deliver a strong message, even if inside you're maybe feeling a little bit different, or something's happened personally that you just need to pull it together. I think there's a line professionally where you know where you stand in those moments. But yeah, I mean, I definitely let my guard down. I will be open with the team at the right point, and I will let them know if things are tough. You know, we went through a phase like a lot of kind of marketing agencies did, maybe like 3 years back, where we'd had a massive growth peak coming out of COVID. You know, we'd hired and then we kind of hit a slump in the market and we had to do a restructuring. We had to lose some headcount. And that's a really tough thing to go through as a leader. You know, you're trying to build a culture, and then, you know, no matter how much you kind of try and make people aware of the commercial updates of the business, you know, you kind of drip feed these communications. When it lands that you've got to do that restructuring for the long-term safeguarding and health of the business, that's a tough message to deliver to your people. people. And, you know, that is absolutely where I'm letting my guard down. I know I've got to do the right thing, but don't think this is easy. So yeah, balancing that kind of blend of how you show up and present is really tough. But I think you just kind of have to, remain yourself. And sometimes I watch videos back, you know, we did a lot of kind of video content as a hybrid organization, and I never watch them before I post them. Same with LinkedIn. I video things and put them out. I never watch them back because I think you just become too critical and analytical of yourself, and I would never do anything. But, you know, when occasionally, you know, you're in your SharePoint and you're like, oh, goodness, here's a video from then, and like, you kind of click on it. I'm like, oh, my goodness. Like, I look like a mess. Like, what was I doing? But, you know, that's just being human. And I think, like, actually, that's what I think when I look at the leaders I look up and respect, like those ones that are human and authentic, and I feel like I've got that kind of connection to their values is what really motivates me. So that's the kind of leader I try to be.
I love that. And speaking about being like bold and making those decisions, I know you use this phrase, which I kind of read about a lot, like bold but grounded. Was a phrase that I kind of seen associated with you. And I was like curious, how do you hold that tension? Because those are two words that for me feel like a polarity. And how do you know, like, what tells you like idea is bold enough to matter but grounded enough to kind of work? Like it's not easy, sometimes it's one or the other. So how do you kind of bring those two worlds together in the way that you approach things?
Yeah, I think it what comes to mind is when I think about being bold, I think about the vision, the art of the possible, inspiring people to think outside the box, be entrepreneurial in their role. But we're always going to have a grounded reality of like some of the things that we face day to day, and also the perspective of the world we operate in. So we know that the world is quite volatile, it is complex, you know, and also perspective that we're all just human beings trying to do our best. Sometimes things won't play out as we want them to. So I think it is just that constant juggling act, but that's how you connect people to a purpose, is by creating that vision and being very clear what that looks like. That inspires people to be bold, but you let them know we understand the reality. So through this, there will be some failures, there will be some things that we change, because this is the world we operate in.
In a creative world that you operate in, then, can you be too bold sometimes with the creativity? Or is there a limit to it? Or is the world your oyster?
How long have you got? How long have you got? I think, like from a marketing perspective and a brand perspective, and, you know, it's something leaders need to consider in their organizations. You know, there is a lot of noise out there. There is a lot of content out there, and you kind of have to, you know, authenticity cuts through, like not just from a leadership perspective, but when we think about brand, whether it be your personal brand or even just like the corporate brand and how you operate. Creative is, you know, in a world of transformation, we're layering in AI, digital marketing is more complex than ever. Ultimately creative cuts through, and I was on like a couple of roundtables recently for the B2B Marketing Awards, the industry that we operate in, and all of the most commercially successful campaigns, the campaigns that created the most impact, all had invested creative in it. So obviously, as someone that operates in that world, I'm going to say you can never be too bold with creative. I guess sometimes, like, we will always push our client boundaries. Like, that's what we're there to do. We want to push the brand, push the direction that they can take to engage their audiences. But, you know, that's our job.
What are your thoughts on the whole AI input, creativity, bringing the human and the tool together to kind of work?
We've been quite quick adopters of AI in the business. I think I could very much see a couple of years ago that, like, the direction of travel. We've won in 2024, we won Best Use of AI at the B2B Marketing Awards, and we picked up the silver late in November last year for different types of initiatives. And I think that's the point with AI. There's a lot of people feeling the pressure to layer AI into their organization, and they're kind of going about it the wrong way. They're like, okay, do I need to put budget to investing in AI? Do I need to, like, consider what this looks like for my organization? Whereas I think actually the way that we approached it was, again, what's our vision, what's our mission, what's our goals for the year, our strategic priorities, what is holding us back on getting there. And then obviously as a marketing agency, we had two different ways to look at AI. Externally, what are the services we believe our clients need, and how can we evolve our services to support layering in AI to our organization? And we'd always been relatively innovative around technology. So again, that cannot be led from the top. That has to be innovation that comes from within your organizations, because some of my team are incredibly, up to date on the latest technologies, and they are going to bring them to us in the leadership team. So internally, we created that innovation framework to make sure people could bring ideas. We obviously went through putting QA processes, governance, making sure legally we were covered, but we really made AI everyone's problem. And then internally, it was very much about aligning our leadership team across our director of people and HR, our operations director, the client services director, and the other areas are delivery, to look and say, okay, where are the inefficiencies in our business and where can AI help? So traditionally, an organization of mine would kind of map growth year on year, and you'd increase headcount as you expect your revenue to grow and your EBIT to grow. We started to completely kind of reshape our KPIs. So gross profit per head would have always been a really key KPI in an agency like ours. We started to challenge that and say, okay, as we layer in technology, how do we also evolve the key KPIs that we're measuring and tracking, and what will that look like over time? So that was a big initiative that we had within our leadership team to make sure we got everyone's kind of mind in the right place, which was all about just being open to change.
Something that's key that you just kind of just touched on there, which is you create an environment for innovation where people can come and bring their ideas to the table. You create an environment for your leadership to also buy in and to be tapped into that. And fundamentally, when you didn't say it, you also, I guess, create an environment for failure, because when you're trying new stuff and leaning into that, nothing's always going to be successful. And that sometimes is what can hold people back from heavily investing in something like AI, something that feels so daunting and so new, that's constantly changing and iterating. It's like, well, I don't want to do it. If I bring it, to your point, it might reduce the headcount and therefore we lose people. If I bring it in, I might lose my job, or I'm not that up to speed with it. How did you manage to, I guess, create those different elements in such a way that then it's been very helpful for your organization?
I think if we look at AI as a example of that, we did kind of ring fence within the P&L like a decent amount of budget to invest in AI. But we kind of agreed as a leadership team that we would make proposals and agree on the investment as we went across the year. And actually what we found is a lot of the time we would run pilots, or we would realize that maybe the big investments weren't the right things to do. So I think not kind of saying no, but creating a process for people to kind of work through that kind of, is this investment worth it? Will ROI pay? What ROI will we get off the back of this? What resources will I need? Is their clients ready to buy this solution? All of that kind of structure and framework that we put in place allowed people to kind of navigate and make the right decisions day to day. And the other part of it is just having open, honest and transparent discussions between people. So, allowing people across different roles within the organization to challenge each other, to provide perspective and feedback, and having that diverse perspectives has always been a really important part of kind of how we've set the strategy and success, really, because if I were to just go out and kind of, do our go-to-market plan, it wouldn't be very good. My success has always been being surrounded by people that are much smarter than me and much more intelligent, and I lean on my leadership team, and I see very much my role to just connect the dots. How do I take all of these great insights from people and how do I bring them together into a strategy that will support the goals we're trying to achieve in the organization?
How much has you been working your way through the organization been helpful to play in part in you being able to know how to lead the organization? Because some of the things that you're saying for me is like, this is someone who knows and understands the people, understands the culture, understands the environment, and therefore you are leading in not just as a figurehead, but you're kind of sometimes putting yourself in the seats of some of the other people or other roles and how they're navigating. So would you always say that that's very important and critical for leaders to be able to really understand the various elements of an organization?
I think that when you come up in the organization, it's almost more of a hindrance, because I think you are sort of, in some respects, you know too much. I think what you said is absolutely correct. As a leader, you have to be empathetic. You have to understand the roles that people are playing, the challenges they have, what are the time drains they have, what are the 3 things that they would change if they could, that would make them more effective in their roles. That's like a workshop we run a lot across departments. Like, if you had one thing that would make you more effective in your role, what would it be? Like, if you can get those insights from the organization, then as a leader, you can make the right decisions. I sometimes wonder if I would have been more effective like now if you just would go in new to an organization, because part of being a successful CEO is having that perspective, is not being caught in the detail, is being able to kind of take the insights, look at things holistically, and, you know, set a strategy and a vision for success. I think sometimes if you've come from one role, you might come in with like perspectives or assumptions that maybe aren't actually right. And I think I probably went through that journey as well, where I came in from client services, and I would say almost like I feel more confident in my role over the last couple of years, where I have got such an incredible team running the business day to day operationally.
That's an interesting perspective. Coming in from client services, when you then make that move all the way to the top and now you're running the business, and then you get to the position where I guess you didn't just sell a business, because I know I had this conversation with people who sold business in the past. It's making the decision this is the right moment to let go. What was that like? Because you've worked hard on this, you built it up, you won the awards, you're doing really, really well. And then you get to that point where you're like, okay, we need to do something slightly different. How'd you go through getting to that decision-making process and then going from hypothetical to reality?
Yeah, I think because I probably wasn't one of the original founders, it almost gave me a bit of that superpower, because I think when I think about the first chapter of Revere, when the 2 founders were running the business, the next piece was then like, okay, we've got to a point, what does it now take to go to the next phase, the next stage of growth? And that was when I came in and we really operationalized a leadership team. We kind of formalized, you know, a lot of the things that businesses do when they get to that 50-60 mark, right, where you can't operate how you've been operating today. So we kind of put a lot more structure in place, put a lot more frameworks in place, and then kind of went into the next stage of growth, like really built out our sales and marketing engine. You know, no one really knew who the Revere brand was in our industry, so you know, we didn't have masses of budget to play with, but we tried to be really smart about how we went to market. And then I guess my reflection was, every year when I would come to write the strategic plan, I would be thinking about the growth that we could make and what that would look like organically. I knew from the founders and the main shareholders of the business that, you know, there wasn't necessarily going to be high amounts of investment that they were willing to put in, although, you know, they were always open to the discussions. And it felt like we got to the right point where we absolutely could have kept growing year on year organically between, you know, let's say 5 and 15%, dependent on where the market goes. But, you know, that's not enough. And I could see the opportunity. We were starting to work with some great brands. We were really leveling up our conversation with more senior people, working more directly with C-suite level clients. And we just weren't able to deliver everything I knew we were capable of. And I could see the value we were building. So I guess, again, I realized that what had got us to a point wasn't necessarily going to take us to that next phase of growth. And I could see that, you know, as much as I loved leading the organization, and if I could, I would have just, you know, stayed doing that, I knew the right thing to safeguard the success of what we built was to look about what the next chapter looked like for us.
A lot of times people talk about exits as wins because they're absolutely amazing. I'm curious, what is the What's the reality? What part of this whole sale process kind of tested you the most as a leader?
Oh my gosh. I mean, where do I start? I think I had some really good advice from people that I kind of think I knew what I was getting into, you know, because you do wear two hats for such a long time. And we were exploring, you know, different routes for the organisation and what that looked like. You know, nothing was set in stone. So it wasn't something that we were openly discussing with employees of the business, you know, for legal reasons as much as anything else. So you're kind of having to run the business day to day. You're continuing to obviously innovate, you know, make sure you're doing all the right things to keep the culture going. Because until that deal's done, there's no guarantee that it's going to go through. Yet on the side, you're managing an extremely complex, you know, negotiations, speaking to different buyers, then you're into diligence. And then, you know, no matter how organized you try and be, no matter how everyone tries to write a roadmap of what it's going to look like, there's always things that just come up that take a bit longer or discussions that need to be had. So it was a real ride. But I think I was always prepared that no matter how wild the ride was, when you got to that moment of exit, that was actually when the real hard work would start, because that's when you need to stand up that day you sell and you have to be on your A game. You have to stand up in front of your people. You have to rationalize the decision you've made. You need to get them to very quickly make sure they believe and understand why you've made that decision. And then you need to be more present than ever in the weeks and months that follow. And that's really hard because you're joining an organization and you need to also be present and start building relationships within the organization you're joining. So it's, I think, like, I definitely had my eyes open to the task at hand. But yeah, a wild ride is what I will describe it as.
In that process, you are showing up for your team, your company, and then you're also, I guess, showing up in a sense to the new people that you're going to be working with, and in that new leadership team you're going to go into. Where do you find the time for you and all the different emotions and the different internal and external things that you're just thinking and processing? Because that sounds like that's quite full on to get to exit. Great. Now the wheel work begins. Okay, I'm on that roller coaster again and again and again and again. There's no slowdown in that process whatsoever.
Yeah, I think I don't have that much time to myself, is like the honest reality, but that works for me. Like, I have an incredibly supportive husband who I just wouldn't be able to do what I do without him. And he does a lot of heavy lifting with our children and, you know, organizes our life, thank goodness. And I just wouldn't be able to do what I do without his support. So I think, like, that's the first thing to say. Like, I used to read these like female leadership books, and you know, I remember, like, you know, they're saying, oh, I'd always have dinner with my children every night, and I was like, how are you having, like, how, like, you're working in a global organization, like, are your children in the office with a half an hour slot coming to eat with you? Like, what? Surely this is not reality. So I think I'm always just really transparent with people that, you know, I'm really lucky that I have a partner that is extremely supportive and we work as a team. I have a busy life with, like, children, stepchildren, so I don't necessarily get loads of time on my own, but that actually is okay for me right now. Like, I really love what I do. I love my time with my family, and actually that's okay. That's enough.
Yeah, I was as you were talking, I reminded me of Indira Nooyi, former CEO from PepsiCo, and she talked about how being a female CEO is impossible. All this whole people talk about work-life balance. You don't have it in balance because you have to be in it. You're juggling so many different things that you need to have that person next to you. She talked about her husband as well, being like, okay, I'm going to run this side of your life for you, like a business, and you run the rest, and together we'll make it work together. And it's important to have that communication.
And I heard someone say recently that work-life balance is almost quite a like unrealistic kind of phrase, and they said the phrase work-life integration, and I really love that because it's exactly what you've just described. Like, we have to wear multiple hats as individuals, you know, professionals, friends, wives, partners, you know, mothers. How do we wear all those hats? And kind of the only way I can really do that is to integrate it. Like, there's no way I can possibly just sign on and off between set working hours and then go, okay, work's done, now it's home life time. Like, I have to kind of juggle things throughout the day as necessary, and sometimes that's how it has to be. But yeah, work-life integration is what I strive for.
I love that. I don't use the work life, I use harmony as my phrase as well. 'Cause I'm like, balance is impossible. You're chasing a fallacy that you can never achieve. So why not actually create a different way of actually looking at it and approaching life, and that actually works?
Yeah. And I just have to be really honest. I think, like, with the kids in particular, you know, they're getting to ages now where they understand it. So I'm quite open with them if they're like, why are you doing a call late, mummy? Like, I haven't seen you all day, which is just like, oh, you know, they're pulling at the heartstrings. But if I can explain and rationalize to them something's going on with someone in the business, like, this is why mummy needs to help and get involved, then they're more empathetic, and they're sort of slowly understanding what it is I'm actually doing, that, you know, is meaning that I'm not always present. And that's really hard, because when I am with them, you're trying to be as present as you can as a parent, but our devices are just, you know, the enemy in making that possible. So in the short time that I have with them in the evenings, I will always try and put my phone down in another room when I can, and make sure that, like, yeah, we're together as a family. But most of that actually is just taxiing them to clubs, and like most parents, it's not really time for us. It's just being their taxi driver.
I always say the little things make a massive difference.
Yeah,
so.
for sure. For sure.
Were you intentional about building a personal brand, and did that help with the sale of Revere and actually amplifying what it is that you do and getting out there?
Yeah, I think so. It's the short answer. I think when we kind of were looking at the vision of the business 4 years ago and kind of, you know, slowly starting to build our brand in market, I kind of quickly realized, probably like 2 years in, I would say, that I was like, I need to be more of the face of this brand, like where we've talked about authenticity as a leader, as a brand. I realised that to complement kind of the corporate efforts we were doing, and incredible kind of marketing team that were doing loads of great things, I needed to kind of overlay that with that kind of human brand, that personal brand, and start to get that out in market. And yeah, it's definitely helped from a growth perspective and from relationship building in the industry and with clients as well. And I think for anyone doing that, one of the things I would say is that you can kind of put these posts out there and you're like, is this working? Is this helpful? And actually quite often a lot of clients or prospects that I speak to will say, oh, I read that article you wrote on multi-touch attribution. I thought that was a really good point around this. We do need to talk about that. Or, oh, I really loved that post on this. And they're not engaging with those posts. They're not commenting. They're not liking. But it's sinking in, and those kind of messages that you're reiterating to your audience are making a difference. So I think like it's really easy to get hung up on kind of the metrics of like the things we put out. But I think I've come to like just not do that. And as I said, I don't really kind of watch any videos back or anything like that. I always do my kind of posts on the train. I write all my posts when I'm traveling because that's when I have time. So I'll just come out of a meeting, I'll think about something. Oh, you know, that CMO said that to me. That's not the first time I've heard that. So I'll write down an idea, kind of do a structure, and then I'll just build it out when I'm traveling.
Wow. I love the, I call it off the cuff, but that intentionality of just kind of capturing your thoughts and just sharing your thoughts without any care, I guess. Of like, you never know where it's gonna go. Some might resonate, some might not. There's no signals coming through, but just getting that out there, I think there's also a personal thing around that. I think it's quite helpful. Like, oh, I've shared my thoughts. If someone likes it, great. If they don't, they don't.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I mean, like when you're building a brand, like you have to try and create differentiation. And in all honesty, there's lots of digital marketing agencies out there saying the same things. So a point of differentiation does come down to values and personality and profile fit. And with a recent client that we worked with recently, we were kind of doing a debrief kind of 3 months into the relationship, how's things going? And they said exactly that. They said, when it came to the agency that we selected for this, on paper, there was a few that got shortlisted for the services, but it really came down to understanding not just the personalities that we've met in the short process of the pitch and the RFP process, but understanding that the values are really lived throughout the organisation when they were kind of doing their diligence. So that kind of feedback also makes things really helpful.
So then how do you make the choice on, or make the decision on when to speak up and when to be silent? You have spoken about a lot of issues, spoken about sexual harassment and stuff, for example, in the past, and things that people easily can shy away from. Yeah. And then a bravery and a courage and I guess authenticity of like, no, I'm standing on this because I believe in inclusive leadership and this is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But it's not always easy to know, should I say that? Should I not? Should I lean in? Should I not? My client's going to like it. I don't know. How do you make that choice, especially being the CEO of an organization?
Yeah. I think when I spoke up on sexual harassment, that was probably one of the toughest decisions that I made as a leader, because the industry that we operate in the technology space, like it is still heavily male dominated, and some of what I was going out and speaking out on, you don't know how people are going to necessarily take that. But again, coming back to kind of authenticity and knowing that we should be partnering with brands and clients that kind of have similar values, it just felt like the right thing to do. I probably don't always think things through as much as I maybe should. So in that instance, like I knew that if I was going to do it, I needed to act quick. Like that was going to it was going to go out, and if I was going to create impact with the message that I had to go out with, it had to kind of be live. And again, I had a really supportive husband who helped me kind of process if it was the right thing to do. And I'm really proud that I went out and spoke up at that point, because in our industry it was interesting because I put out a post, I got invited on a podcast in our industry to talk about sexual harassment in the kind of IT channel, and then off the back of that, it's quite interesting the engagement you get on LinkedIn, I guess, around it, or online around the podcast and around the post is good but somewhat limited. What happened behind the scenes was my inbox was inundated from women speaking up, sharing stories, thanking me for speaking out. And actually it really put like quite a weight on my shoulders, because I kind of was like, I just kind of wanted to speak out because I just wanted to make sure that when these things happen, people speak about it. I then felt like I had this massive responsibility to somehow continue the conversation. And I was like, I'm not really sure what I can do in my role. Like I'm the CEO of a marketing agency, what can I do to support this? But it really opened my eyes up to that. I met some great people through those conversations, and I'll obviously continue to champion any talking points around subjects of those nature in the future as well.
Do you think that is one of your superpowers, not thinking things through completely and then just acting on it, because it can create moments like that, as well as some other things you kind of described all the way throughout your career?
Yeah, I'm probably a bit of a blend really, because I'm very goal orientated. I'll work towards targets and visions, and I've got a lot of kind of process and detail orientation in me as well. At the same time, I just sometimes like to let's give it a go. Let's see how it goes. Let's get on with it. And I think when it comes to issues like we've just discussed, you just need to know who you are and what you stand for. And I feel like, my personal and professional journey has led me to a good point on that. I'm pretty comfortable in my own skin now.
There was a version of you that navigated all the way through your career and then stepped into the CEO role of Revere. There's a version of you that built Revere out and now sold it, and you're stepping into Marketbridge. Are they the same person, or does something have to shift for you as you go into this next chapter?
That's a really good question. I think you have to respect the shift that takes place. Within the new organization, I am not the CEO. I am helping lead Europe and, will be part of helping shape, some of the business initiatives. But there is a lot of people above me in the organization that are making a lot of the decisions that I would have once made. But, as I said earlier, this is all about taking what we've built to the next chapter for the right reasons. So I know that's what we need now to continue to deliver that incredible experience, not just for our clients and the services we deliver for them, but also for our people. How can we get them working on bigger and better projects? How can we make sure that they've got the right infrastructure on a larger scale with bigger training programs, bigger insights, more global reach and campaigns that they can do that, will strengthen their experience and their enjoyment in role. So I think you have to respect that there is a shift, from a personality perspective and from the behaviors that I adopt. I think, I'm very much taking that forward, but I think you have to be mindful that you are in a different role and you do need to slightly shift the way you behave because, you're not the leader and the decision maker anymore. You have to respect the people above you and support those leaders in different ways.
Yeah, that's a massive transition, though.
It is.
I'm going from being the one that makes the call to be like, I want to say that, but I can't. Oh, okay.
It absolutely is. But I think that's where we were really, we really took our time in the diligence process to make sure that we were selecting, the right home for Revere. We spoke to a lot of different people and we made sure that, the decision that we made was the one that felt that would provide the best opportunities. And again, you can't go into those decisions looking at yourself, your ego, what you want for your career. You have to look at it for Revere as a whole and the people within it. And that was absolutely the route that we took in the decision.
Of that. If you can go back and speak to the Fee who first took over from the founders, what is one truth about leadership that you would tell yourself that could have saved you months or years of pain?
I think it's not really a massive moment, but the that aha moment, that kind of reflective piece that came was realizing that leadership isn't built in those frameworks, those plans. You can't just set those big initiatives off and do lots of all hands meetings. That the way you really drive performance is by creating that culture. And I think really focusing on people initiatives, making sure that you really understand the voice of your people to help you achieve those goals and drive that growth. And it is in those little moments, it's in how you show up every day and the decisions you make. One of the things that we implemented probably about 2 years ago was we used a employee engagement app, Water, which tracks our employee engagement across all different types of metrics week on week. So it's a live insight into how your people are feeling, how engaged they are around lots of different areas. And that really became the living and breathing kind of data that, of course, then we layer on top our day-to-day interactions and our observations. But that just became so important to how I showed up as a leader, because I could take those insights, understand how people were feeling, and rather than us building some big people and culture strategy, it just became an always-on thing. And I could take ideas from the teams that they would submit via this platform and we could action them. So I think stepping into the leadership role, you think that you've got a plan, you need to execute it and everything will fall in place and you'll play your role. Whereas actually my biggest learning was actually what you really need to do is take all the insights from your teams and you need to make sure that you shape your strategy based on all that insight, because if you can't answer those concerns and questions that people have, they're never going to connect to the vision that you're presenting.
And that piece around even taking people on that journey and that vision, I think a lot of times it's not always around following through. It's more around acknowledging sometimes that's important, that as a senior leadership team, I guess you've seen things like, well, we can do that, we can't do that. or at least you can acknowledge it. And that
Yeah.
makes a massive difference. And I think a lot of times people can easily just ignore them. And therefore people are like, what's the point of me speaking up? Because no one's going to listen to me anyway. So even just doing that in itself is such a powerful way of approaching things.
Yeah, and we have like our employee platform allows people to engage with us anonymously, so they can send in those kind of observations. And I'm always really mindful that I want to provide kind of responses that are empathetic, that show that I do really understand, I've really listened, and I will try and provide as much transparency on the reality that as I face as a leader and the decisions that I have to take as to why that might not be a right reality today, but that the fact that they've told me that is really important, because that knowledge is really powerful to hold as you move forward in the organisation, and it helps shape your thinking, even on like a really nano level, about how you might reposition wording when you're providing an update to the company and you're thinking, oh, okay, but I need to take into account people have fed back and they're feeling about this. So it's that real holistic view. As I said, I really very much see my role in connecting the dots across everything that happens in our organisation, and helping shape that storytelling.
Do you miss your old role of, like you said, going out and building those customer client relationships, all the different things you did prior to that? Do you miss that at all?
I still do quite a lot of it, actually. Like I still manage my team of I definitely am not kind of delivering any work day to day anymore. Like I do sometimes try and get involved in projects, and then my team are like, no, we don't need you. So they'll just tell me, they're like, no, like you don't need to. I'm like, shall I join? They're like, no. But I do, like, they definitely bring me into the right discussions and know when it's appropriate to kind of bring in me to help that relationship. And it's really important. Our business fundamentally, it only exists with our clients, and as the CEO, it's extremely important that I have those right client relationships, and equally, out in the industry, speaking with other agency leaders, I have learned so much from just picking the brains of my fellow agency CEOs. And actually most people will tell you what they can. You obviously are aware that you're competing in certain instances, but actually even just this Friday coming, I'm meeting up with a selection of female marketing agency leaders, and we've all had a lot of us have had quite a lot of change over the last year in particular, so we're all going to come together, reflect, and celebrate together, really, and stuff like that is just so valuable.
Brilliant. And goes back to that point of like, leadership doesn't have to be lonely at the top. You just have to be intentional around building a network of people around you to help support you in that journey.
Exactly that.
If I was then come full circle to kind of wrap this up, go back to the 8-year-old version of Fee. If she could see you now, what would she be proud of, the most proud of?
That's a tricky one. I think it's such an obvious answer, but I think probably just kind of, navigating leaving a marriage when I wasn't very happy. I think that was probably like my biggest moment that kind of shaped me. And my children were very young when I left. And that was quite a lot to take on. And what followed over the coming years was nothing but easy. But I think the 8-year-old me probably wouldn't want to know that was coming. But I guess to kind of put the positive spin on it is that resilience that, I'm going to feel that I'm in a position that I have the strength to make the right decision for the happiness for myself long term, and ultimately for the happiness of my children. They're much better off having two parents that are happy individually. So I think knowing that I would have the strength and courage to make change when things weren't going well is probably something, if I could have told my younger self, that would have been a good message to deliver.
I love that. How do you build and develop that resilience? I know it's obviously things you go through help strengthen you, But it's in those times when you feel like you can't go on or you push through, can be really, really tough and debilitating for some people sometimes. And in your situation, you're doing that, you've got a family, you've got work that you're doing, you're juggling so much stuff, there's a lot of responsibility on your plate. And you obviously made that choice and that decision, and it's been the best thing for you. But how do you, if someone's in that space right now, what would your advice be for them?
I think you just have to keep talking. It's just really simple, but you just have to find people that you can connect with that will help guide you in those hard moments, help you make those decisions. And when you internalize a lot of things that are going on, you start writing your own narratives, you start kind of making things, bigger than they are. So I think making sure you surround yourself with a good support network is important. I think you're right, you build resilience by the experiences that we go through, and that's a lot of it. But when I think about how you get through that, it's all about connection.
It's an interesting way of, I guess, ending, because when I think about a lot of what you've talked about on your journey, that's kind of been that through line in it. It's like that connection that even you had when you come into organization, connection you had with the founders who saw something in you for you to then take over, to the connection you've built within the organization and your leadership team, to the connection you've also built externally with clients or even publicly facing. That thread has been kind of consistent of, this is when you talk about authenticity, it comes down to connection. When people can know, like, trust you, you can make a difference, both internally and externally, and you've just showcased that in all the way throughout your life and your journey. And it's just amazing just to be able to get a little snippet of what that is. So thank you very much for coming on and sharing.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
This is Everyday Leadership. We'll speak to you next week.